Well, first of all, introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Bill Mazzetti. First of all, I'm a great friend of Kirk. I've known you for years. What most people don't know, Kirk
Mentored me sometimes.
Kind of say, but Kirk had a weak moment, worked for Rosendin for a while, and worked for JT and Matt Englert. And JT is the famous Justin Tinoco, now executive member, as is Matt. Kind of my little brothers in the business. Been at Rosendin 18 years, longer than I was at Mazzetti & Associates, and really came up three different ways. Started out in the data center business, believe it in, 1982. My college design thesis was a data center. One of my mentors, also very close friends of my family and my father in San Francisco, Charlie Krieger. Charlie was an original data center engineer back in the Bay Area. Started the first computer roundtable, which was kind of the spirit animal of the Uptime Institute, and also a mentor of Peter Gross when Peter was at Telecom.
No kidding.
Yep. Peter and I share that history. So Charlie's old engineer. Charlie's a good family friend. He was in the hospital the day I was born.
Oh, wow.
So first job out of the Army was working for Charlie.
Well, hold on. Back the whole truck up. Where are you originally from? I know you...
San Francisco, born and raised. Still live there.
I know, but like now your backyard is like the zoo, right? But you weren't always in that neighborhood. You probably were...
No, west central part of town. I live within 3 miles where I grew up. No, I traveled the world, lived all over the world for work.
But you were born and raised in San Francisco?
Born and raised in San Francisco.
And your father was like you, a PE? I guess?
Yeah, he started his engineering firm. It's kind of funny. So started Mazzetti & Associates, or Mazzetti, Takahashi and Parrish, back in '62, the year I was born.
And what were their specialty? What were
electrical engineering. That's all they did. And really they did healthcare, they did kind of general engineering, kind of anything that's, anything in the region, right?
Yeah.
Dad's business grew. He was doing work for Safeway and did distribution centers, bakeries, soda plants, and so the Cragmont sodas in the old days, things like that, for both Lucky and Safeway. And that's when they would do it all over the country. So worked from the East Coast to the West Coast. That's how Dad got, kind of grew the business. Worked with a good friend of his named Ed Donnelly, and Donnelly & Associates is at that point, and still is, kind of the top industrial freezer guys. So if you're making ice cream or milk, they're those guys. And so worked with them for years. Dad had a little niche business, probably had 15 guys working for him when I joined him. And then it kind of went a different direction. We got a lot bigger. But so born and raised in San Francisco.
Where do you go to, where's that? Are you, first of all, were you an only child?
No, youngest of three. I am only two of us left. Lost my oldest sister a couple of years ago. Aortic tear, gone in 8 minutes. Miss my sister immensely. But yeah, it's okay. Everybody's got to go sometime. There's two things that everybody shares in common. You enter the earth and you leave the earth at some finite period of time.
And that period of time in the middle, which is the point in which we dismiss or ignore our mortality in every sense. So,
well,
you with your
no, you spent time in the boats, right? So you spent time underway in the boats. I spent time, and you call it the teams. We call it the team SEALs, and I spent time in special forces. And the joke is, for a lot of us in those businesses, especially as a young veteran or a young active duty at that point, you just don't. The joke is, we never thought we'd live this long.
Yeah,
and on all of
things like that. All right, sure.
You just you kind of live in the moment. You're living on deployment to deployment, or float to float, or downrange to downrange mission, and it's like, you're just, and then you just wake up one day. It's like, Jesus Christ, I'm beat to shit.
Well, the good news though, look, that knife cuts both ways. There's the benefit of that in which you get the most out of life, where most people tend to think about their life in the future oh, I'm going to do that one day. Whereas when you're like, man, I shouldn't be around in a few years, you're living it, and your relationships with people are pretty genuine and real. The bad part is you can neglect certain things that you're going to need in the future, that like your health as an example.
How about kids? So that's something that happened to me and my wife, is that, but when I'm always deployed or I'm always working, and I'm going to tell you a funny story during the process about, kind of perspective. And so in the moment you're doing what you think is right, and all of a sudden you miss out on something pretty significant. And that's, but it's, and sometimes, you ask me about kind of what you want to talk about. It's really not about you in life. It's about the people around you, and how good a husband, father, family member, teammate you are to everybody else. And do you add more value than you take? So you take every day because you consume oxygen, you eat a meal, you're working, you get paid, that kind of stuff. But do you give basically, are you creative? Are you giving more than you take in? And so, but you're right, you can live in the moment. And I have guys that, are that way. And, you've seen that. It's kind of like you've seen when you go back to veterans veterans events, and guys really never kind of escape that. It's just like going back to high school or college reunions. It's like, Jesus Christ, that guy's still 18 years old and he's not 60.
Oh,
okay.
wow.
And you see that. I mean, that's kind of life in general. And I think sometimes people will I think you're right, live in the moment, but I think as you are in the moment, you have to continue to evolve. Now, some of it, like as veterans, you're evolving because it's a survival instinct, literally. I mean, you evolve and get better skills because you prevail that day or on that mission. Sometimes you don't. And so I think that's I think living in the moment, but you're right. When you're under 30 and you are a swashbuckling gunfighter, or you're on float and you're a 24-year-old kid driving a $500 million piece of hardware around under the ocean, that's a pretty cool lifestyle.
A couple $1 billion for each
couple
boat.
billion now. Yeah, by the way, when you put all the ordnance on the damn thing, it's
well, that doesn't even include those, right?
Yeah.
So my thing would be, so you were the youngest of three. I'm the youngest of three. And like, was your father, before he was an engineer, was he former military? He's from that generation, which everyone.
So World War II drafted. So he was in the Navy, a couple of years in the Navy. He was an electrician's mate in the Navy, got out. So it wasn't really a career thing, wasn't a real focus.
But that's what led to him being an electrical engineer, is being an electrician's mate in the Navy.
Yeah, I mean, he went to, it was funny because he actually took 2 years. So he went to Santa Clara like I did. I had a lot of choices to go to college, mostly because I was a really good lacrosse player out of high school.
Were you?
Yeah.
What position did you play?
I played midi to start with, and I played attack when I got later in college when I got to club ball.
Were you pretty fast, or were you just strong? What was it?
A little bit of both, actually. I'm playing.
How tall are you now?
5'11".
Okay, so were you 5'11" in high school?
Yeah, 5'10". I mean, I didn't get much bigger after really middle of college.
Lean and mean?
Yeah, well, I mean, my playing weight was like 198.
Okay.
So
I mean, lacrosse was big back in those days, I guess.
Not at all.
I was like, wow, I didn't even know lacrosse.
So in the Bay Area, complete cult sport. So 8 high schools played, and how I got into it, because I wasn't a very good soccer player, and I loved soccer football. Couldn't play football because I couldn't get a clearance because I had some weird German-sounding Schlotterman's disease in the right knee, which is basically growth-induced tendinitis. So it's like I wanted to play a sport that I can go basically, beat another kid with a stick, have a team sport, dynamic, and lacrosse was the last thing. And lacrosse came to SI, and also Santa Clara when I got there, because one of the teachers, there was some interest in starting it. And then his college roommate, a guy named John Carney, was out in San Francisco working. Now, John, by the way, you kind of fast forward. John is now the lieutenant governor of Delaware.
Oh, wow. Okay, so he went from San Francisco.
Yeah, he's from Delaware originally. So started there, and it was just a sport, loved it, and then played in college, and then I played club ball afterwards, and I played till I was about 29. Then, when you're traveling for work a lot, you kind of go from the first line to the second line to the fourth line because you're not around a lot. Then I started playing hockey, because the funny thing about lacrosse, when your feet stop moving, you stop moving. Yeah. At least in hockey, when you stop moving, you might be able to glide a little bit.
I'm all about those lazy sports like that. So I'm not saying.
Oh, you could say that, Cole. You do the tough mutter. Give me a break on that, bro.
But I'll tell you this: the only sport I really truly enjoy going and watching live is hockey. Oh. All day, I'll watch it. I don't even know the rules. Like sitting down watching it on TV, I can maybe do it during the playoffs, but I have a hard time. Like I know you're a golfer and you golf all over the world. I've never been to the Masters, but I've been invited a few times. But I'm not a golfer. Like there's certain things. Hockey's one of those things that I could get involved in and get behind, and I don't have the coordination.
Hockey and basketball, I think, live are the two best sports. I think football live for where there's big college football, basketball because they flow,
and it's intimate. It's much more intimate. I feel like when I go to the other pro games, I'm like, typically you're in a box and you're so far away.
Right. So big Niners fan, been so since 60.
That's right.
Dad had tickets in '64 at Kezar. I got them in the will. Kept until they went to Santa Clara. And the one thing about Santa Clara, when they moved there, they turned the stadium 45 degrees. They put us right back on our old section, basically in seating.
Good seats.
It was 20-yard line, visitor side, north end zone, and on the long side. But you're facing directly at the sun. You're baking. I mean, you're down there and you're cooking.
So you have to so the suffrage is you have to bake, and the second part is you have to watch the Niners, which has to be miserable to have to do that.
Not the last few years, but there's a few years that can be pretty.
I don't know. I grew up. My family's from Northern California. My mom and dad were born and raised in like Petaluma, Santa Rosa area, and I grew up going to Candlestick, and I grew up like it was the law. You were a Niners fan, but that's back when you had Montana and Steve Young.
That's in the days where it's really been the question in San Francisco: is it really a baseball town or football town? And it's really.
What do you think?
So if you I think it depends on the year. I mean,
it's got to be a football town.
It's more of a football town, I think. But I've always liked the Giants. But it's funny you mentioned Petaluma because my dad grew up in the marina. So if you know San Francisco, he grew up 2 blocks away from the Palace of Fine Arts. And then his father had a doctorate in chemistry, worked for Stauffer Chemicals, which is now the Chevron ag business. And he sold ag chemicals in Sonoma County in the wine
70s?
business.
Oh, okay.
No, shit, I'm talking like the 30s and 40s, 50s kind of stuff. My father goes to Santa Clara. His younger brother, my uncle Bob, his brother Bob, my uncle Bob, UB, they moved to Healdsburg, actually moved to Fulton, bought 200 acres of vineyard, and were there. And then they moved into, if you know Healdsburg now, pretty high end. They had the house on the corner of the river, which I think they just sold that lot for $12 million. But so my family moved to the country, and if you look at kind of where my family's from in the old country, which is really in Piemonte around Asti, it looks a lot like that. And it's like, and every weekend when they're in San Francisco, they'd have a country place to go up there, and they'd hunt on the weekends. They do picnics and the whole thing. So it kind of looks like the Texas weekend lifestyle for an outdoorsman.
So, man, I love unpackaging this stuff because I've spent so much time with you. Normally, though, we're with a lot of other people and we're shooting stuff and going bang, and you don't get into some of the good things. My favorite part about the podcast is I get to kind of unpeel people like an onion and try to.
We're now calling you the white skinny Oprah.
Is that my new nickname?
Yeah, just wait till JT gets a hold of you.
I don't have that T-shirt yet, but I'll tell you this. Speaking of which, I have my Bill Mazzetti shirt. So for those that I am unable to quit as I'm currently too legit. This was a gift from Bill Mazzetti, and I had to wear it on our podcast.
So we do it, the fact is...
What was the history behind this? It just came in the mail one day.
So the fact is, there's probably 6 guys I send like memes and stuff off Instagram to all the time. And there's 2 kind of things I'm known for. I get bored, I'm stuck in traffic or at the airport, I start calling my friends because I wanted somebody to talk to.
Of course.
And then the other part was you're on there and go, hey, JT and Kirk would love this. And I just order it for you and I just send it and random stuff shows up at the house.
Oh, I love it.
So I just thought it'd be kind of funny.
I wore it one day to like a soccer game. My daughter's like, Dad, you can't wear shit like that ever again in public where I'm going to be. And I was like, this is the only shirt I could wear from this point forward now when I see you.
Exactly. So if kids had a little more judgment, they would like just... Accept the humiliation once.
Oh, for sure.
Versus now you just keep doubling down. You keep parlaying that baby forward.
Last year, her freshman year, first whatever the homecoming.
That's the baby. That's
my daughter's the youngest. Yeah, you met her. She's got 2 older brothers.
Yeah,
she's a little bit high speed, low drag, so to speak. She
running the Tough Mudders with you and all that crazy shit.
Smokes them. Smokes them. She does all of them. Like she is hands down.
She's like the littlest brother, but she's just got a case of the ass.
100%, right? And she was a tomboy her whole life, and then one day woke up and asked for makeup, and I was like, "That's not happening." Yeah. But she's a super girl now, and I went to her homecoming. Like it was new for me.
Yeah.
Like my son's coming home with girlfriends all the time. I was like, "That's no big deal. I'm used to that."
But the girl's perspective, having a daughter, is different. Yeah.
Not even the same. Not even like when LD was pregnant. It's like, hey,
I have nieces, so I kind of have the Uncle Bill.
It's a different ball game. I think one time it was like JT and LD and I were sitting talking, and LD's wife, Miss Brooke, was pregnant with his daughter, and he has 2 boys too. And I was like, hey, it ain't anything like it's not like another toothbrush. Like there's going to be a whole shift of dynamics, right? And I go to my daughter's first high school dance, like it's they do the staging of photos at somebody's house, and you show up, and all the parents are awkwardly, And I bought this before January 6th, but maybe it was a year or 2 ago. I was in Park City Christmas, and I was with Minnie Bon Jovi.
Oh, yeah, you guys were mentioning that trip, yeah.
And we were just making bad decisions from the bottom of the hill to the top of the hill. We're walking up the hill.
That does sound like you guys, though, just in general, though. But, on the other hand, though, you're still converting oxygen to carbon dioxide, and there's no visible marks on you.
I know, like, there are times where we'll ask each other, I'm like, how is it that we survive and all these other people that we know? Knowing what we would go, like, deep in the paint sometimes, but...
Yeah, but not stupidly so. So how you survive is that's a point where I think both of you guys have a unique skill, and JT not being a veteran and you being that, there's a little light that starts blinking in the back of your head that just goes, just tap the brakes just for a second.
I'll tell you this, the way I've always viewed it is you'll never see JT and I both going full tilt at the same time. And the reason why we're such strong partners, I think, is because when he's letting loose, then I know that I have to make sure that someone's there to catch him when he jumps, and vice versa.
Now, by the way, the funny part was, if you've ever seen Tinoco and Engler together, they're like...
the blind leading the blind. It is some of the funnest stuff I've seen. Like Engler himself, like dude, English is savage anyways. He did that helicopter jump with us. He was the last one and made sure that he went the highest. So and I have to make sure I say that because.
Now, did you guys helocast that, or did you guys fast rope out of that? Did you parachute out of it?
So I'll tell you the story. So anybody
jumping out, I don't like jumping out of helicopters because there's too much fall, none enough throw. But that's a.
Yeah, but that's an Army. I mean, like, listen, you're used to the big boy stuff, and we're going to unpack it.
I've jumped out of literally everything that flies.
So we're gonna shift gears in that stuff here in a second. But I'll tell you, like at PTC, I was flying into PTC, and I was like, my brother, one of my brothers, Army guy. You know, he's he's in Aspen or Vail.
We know his rep.
Yeah, but he's doing some sort of investment thing, and he's like, hey, he's like, hey, I'm out here skiing, and I'm like, hey, I'm on a plane to Hawaii. I'm sitting next to my COO, which is Rob, who he knows, and JT's, and I go like, I'm going to Hawaii, and he goes, listen, if you go look at my buddy, you know, blah blah blah, and he owns Trident Adventures. And I'm like, what is it? And he goes, you jump out of helicopters. He's a Navy SEAL, and you get to do a lot of fun stuff. And I was like, that sounds like my speed. So before we had even landed in Hawaii,
you're on the plane Wi-Fi.
I go to my Salmi is my EA, and she is the ultimate gatekeeper, right? So, and she goes, listen, I'll sort this. So before we landed, she booked like a group of 12.
Yeah,
I didn't even know what we were doing, and we didn't even. I mean. I think it was the day before the event, and JT and I are like, oh, yeah, we have these 12 things. We better figure out who's going to come with us to go jump out of this helicopter. You show up, and it's like, I have no idea what we were getting ourselves into.
Yeah.
We show up, and this guy is humble and nice, as you can imagine. And Navy SEAL was an instructor. He's the only guy on earth that has like this approval by the FAA to even do this type of stuff. And he takes us out, and he's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I just want to have fun. And he's like, well, there's something. I'm like, just make sure we have a great time. I don't... Like all that other stuff is noise. Let's just go have fun.
Yeah.
Go out. You go to the Magnum PI place. You sit in
which they put 3 houses on now, which is kind of a bummer. But
well, no, but there's like they have the car, and you get to get you know, all that stuff, and it was pretty cool. And then from there, you get in these helicopters, and you go through some training. I mean, like these guys are military, so they are not gonna. They want you to have a good time, but they want you to be alive. So we, you know,
generally a really strong business plan at that point.
It's not a bad idea.
Kill the customer.
it's not a good business.
If I could put a 0 Yelp rating because I died.
So listen, I don't even know this guy. My brother took his sons out there a few times, and I'm like, hey, I'm the youngest of the brothers, and let's do this. And Rob is a team guy too, so those two guys were basically ton bigger than each other and stuff. And we fly out, and then you know, they are like, hey, look, you could jump anywhere between 10 feet and 40 feet, and we're like, well, how much extra do we have to pay to go above that? Like, how high can we go? He's like, well.
About 60, it starts feeling like concrete when you hit it. Or your knees end up on your forehead.
He goes, the highest we ever had was 70. And I was like, I'll take it. I'll do it. And he goes, well, I'd like to see you jump first one time. Maybe on the second try, I'll let you go. And you know, and I know that like seeing things on movies different. Doing them yourself, in which you realize like, okay, man, I'm really putting myself in harm's way here. And I have to have the emotional capacity to make sure I don't panic. Because when you're dropping, if you don't land the right way, if you land too far going one angle, then
cantered over, your feet are apart. I mean, stuff snaps off. Yeah.
Oh man, you could hurt yourself real bad. And I think Matt went at 65. Matt went at 65.
I know. If you haven't noticed, we're not as young as we used to be. And then if you do get hurt, you don't heal really fast.
Listen, I think I stopped drinking just so I could. I mean, obviously, I'm having a beer or something like that now. But speaking of which, you need another beer.
Absolutely.
My thing is, I wanted to be able to have more fun, and I realized that I wasn't able to heal as fast as I used to. So, but we jumped out, and then there's a safety swimmers in a boat there, and then next thing you know, you're tanked up. If you have your license, you're tanked up, and you're in the water. And then he gives you those little torpedoes you put between your legs. Yeah, you know, like you could hold them in front of you, like little like. I'm sure you've seen.
I got dive certified. Hang on to your hat. 1976.
Holy cow!
Like
where was that at?
Florida? Mendocino.
No
kidding.
Like
Van Dam State Park, 10 feet of
Lake Mendocino.
No, Mendocino, Pacific Ocean, kelp bed, 10 foot of visibility, 50
super
degree
cold,
water.
great white shark capital breeding.
A little farther north, but it's still like you're definitely
there's danger there.
You're definitely fifth on the food chain out there.
All right, well listen. So but anyways, that was such a good time. Next year you have to do it with us. And
absolutely,
I already booked. That guy the event itself and the videos and all the things they did. So if anybody that's listening, if you go to Hawaii for your family visit, like go hook up Trident Adventures, because that was one of the greatest times that we had. And I've got to do a lot of cool, this industry offers us the opportunity to do just about everything. Would you agree?
Indeed.
I mean, we were jumping out of helicopters, and Jesse on the team and, a couple of our customers and guys on the team are out racing Lamborghinis up around the island, right? So I'm like, you can have a good time in this space and still really, do a lot of good things.
Great.
So, but that was a good time. It's funny because like Rob was doing it, and Rob's like, woo, because he's like you. He comes from an SF background, and he's got to do way more exciting things. But if you're, a lot of the non-veterans. It was awesome.
But heights and jumping fears a lot of people. I mean,
if you don't jump right.
I mean, there's a unit guy that got killed last year because he fell off a fast rope. I mean, that's
all the time.
The fast roping injuries are real common. It's like you just lose grip, or you kind of get a little sideways and you come off the rope, and
I think that I would feel better jumping out of a helicopter than fast roping, right? Because that's a lot of mechanics to put together in terms of between the head and the hands, But shifting back to you, so you were born and raised in San Francisco, and you're the youngest of three.
Indeed.
Your father was an electrician's mate in the Navy, got an electrical engineering, PE, had his own firm, was a partner in that. What made you go to Santa Clara? I know that you were playing, lacrosse and club and stuff, but why did you pick Santa Clara? I mean, great school, by the way, great in women's soccer. I know that too, but I know that school very vividly. I know where it's at. So you picked that school because it was close to home, I guess?
Well, let's back up a little bit. So
how do you know you're going to get in the Army?
So it's kind of the punchline is you kind of follow your friends, and you all of a sudden you turn around and go, wait a second, I'm in a really different space. So grew up in San Francisco, Catholic school kid. Go to St. Cecilia's, end up a lot of St. Cecilia's kids go to SI. My father was
What's SI?
St. Ignatius. St. Ignatius.
Okay.
Jesuit school, out in the avenues. My dad was over by USF. Went there for high school, and just got good lacrosse player. So the funny part in high school is this is where clearly if you're looking at national programs which are really east of the Mississippi, it's not like Notre Dame or Denver or some of the schools that are kind of say east of the Mississippi. I mean, the old joke during for many years with Goldman Sachs, which was a long time Mazzetti client, which was the Western District of San Francisco started at the Hudson River. And so really, if you look at lacrosse, it's kind of like not the East Coast. It's about like about 100-mile swath from the Atlantic Ocean in.
Sure.
And so really wasn't on the West Coast. You get a lot of transplants come out. So started playing, like I said, because I couldn't play football and I couldn't play soccer because I couldn't get a medical clearance. One, I wasn't any good. So it's kind of like I'm still a huge European football fan to this day.
Who's your team?
Arsenal.
Okay.
And has been for years, since the Invincibles. And so doing real well this year. But anyway, so go to SI, lifelong friends out of SI, get recruited. So what's funny is that, they have something in the old days called the Lacrosse Guide. It was like the book that comes out every couple of weeks, and it prints the national stats. And so I'm 26 in the country in scoring as a senior. And so, stupid kid, what do I know? Okay, I'm going to send a college application to Duke, Yale, Cornell, and Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins has to be the national champion. So literally, I mean, and this is not the days where, you have these kind of cloistered college counselors, which my sister-in-law is one, and she's really good at it. But it's like, you just you're filling out your application, and, you do the essay, and it literally says, what's your high school sports experience? I'm captain of the lacrosse team, da-da-da-da. Not a particularly good team, but there's three or four of us play really well. And so I basically just take the Lacrosse Guide, Xerox the sheet, staple it to the application, and mail it. The AD from Johns Hopkins calls the AD at SI like 5 days later and goes, who the hell is this kid? Because there's like three of us on the top 50 for scoring. Two went to Novato High, and there was me. And it's like, we've been wondering what the hell's going on out there. He goes, there's some, it's like some club sport here, but this is the real deal. And he goes, and there's two other kids you might want to look at. So it's funny. So got into Yale, terrible engineering program. It's all general engineering, no electrical. I really wanted to go to Cornell. 5,000 kids come in for like 250 seats. I had great grades, 1,400 board scores, great lacrosse system. And they're like, dude, your grades aren't good enough. You're shitting me. I got a 3.6 and I got 1,400 board scores and I'm a national scorer. He goes, yeah, dude, there's like five
take
guys.
A number.
Right,
right, there's a ton of
we're serving 34. And so, and then with Duke, it was funny because in that case, it was like a 3-step process. And I got through like the second one. I go, oh, this is too much goddamn work. And I threw it aside. So my folks are really cool. Just go to school wherever you want. And so I go, which is really funny because you talk about kind of a culture shock. So you come up on the West Coast. There's not really rough parts of town. You know, remember, this is the 80s in the East.
Wow. How about
now?
Well,
it's so you think about like Harlem in the 80s, Baltimore in the 80s, where it's rough. I mean, we didn't have that kind of racial tension out West. So Mazzetti's out there. I go on that like week-long school trip, and you get Memorial Day off. That's the day they have the combine at Johns Hopkins. Got my gear, jump on the train, Washington, Baltimore, 45 minutes. Pull off in the station. It's 8 o'clock in the morning. I come outside and it's like, okay. And I start walking up to Johns Hopkins. It's like, oh shit. I mean, it's like, I'd never seen anything like that. So I just start running through the neighborhood because, little skinny white kid coming up the alley. It's like, I mean, and it's just, it was kind of that real culture shock. And so I get up to Homestead Stadium, and I come in and I'm like, an hour early. It's like, so Bill, why are you here so early? You're excited.
It's the safest time to get.
I go, sir. I says, no, Coach. I ran from the train station. He goes, how fast did you do it? He goes, 18 minutes. I go, well, that would be like a top percentile. I go, well, I says, I would say. And my deadpan reply was, I think, whether it's true or not, I go, fear is a great motivator. I don't think I have that on a lacrosse field. So I had a great combine, got offered, and then it's like, it's Baltimore in February. It's like, it's cold and it's snowy and kind of dreary. And I go, dude, it's like 64 degrees at home. And it's like, I'm going back to Cali. So I ended up going to Santa Clara, gone into Berkeley, Santa Clara, and USC. USC is just starting the engineering program, which ends up being a good program. Went to Santa Clara. It kind of fell there by default. Good school, great friends at that point. Went through RTC there, same thing. You're in the dorms. Guys across the hall, your buddies are in RTC. Why don't you go along? Great. Did that. Kind of went through the whole program. Come through at the end. Get my engineering degree. You get commissioned the next day. And actually, you get commissioned the day before, kind of like they do at the academies. You get pinned, and then you walk the next day. And then it's kind of funny because the military was a real break for my family.
What year is this, by the way?
84. So I'm 60.
So in 84.
Yeah, 84.
Okay. And the military is kind of still have this, like the Vietnam hangover, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not like the most glorious place to probably be back then.
No, right? But you know what? It's kind of funny. So you just kind of, you follow your friends. And so the funny part was that my folks completely disagreed with the idea. My father being kind of like his father.
From day one, from like your freshman year, or like when you graduated?
No, I kind of signed the you signed the contract when you're a junior, and it was like my family disowned me. Said, hey, we don't agree with it. We're paying for college. We're not paying for college anymore. And I had like 10 grand in the bank. I had enough money to kind of get through
your
my
RTC
last 2 years.
Didn't cover that?
No, you know why? Because all the scholarships were gone. So come out and they said, okay, you want a branch. So you get an application, just like the academy. So what branch do you want? Now the academy, you know how they do it. They do it by class ranking. First guy or gal gets their assignment and their branch and so if the first person wants to go to Buds or Fly or
super competitive
or Surface Warrior or Submariner, you kind of get that spot. And then it kind of just force ranks all the way down. So I get the whole thing and they go, well, why do you want to be an infantryman? Well, I like the infantry. It goes, so it's like, you don't want to be an engineer? I go, I'm going to do that the rest of my life. Got a reserve commission. So I said, but here's the deal. I need the first possible class. I'm freaking broke. I have like $600 to my name. I've got a car and I got to drive across the country and I got to get $600, which is about enough gas to kind of sleep in the car and work across the country. Get to Fort Benning. So I graduate the 12th of June. I get to Fort Benning on July the 3rd. Sign-in's July the 5th, and it's 300 second lieutenants in the infantry officer basic course. 275 are from West Point.
Oh, wow.
So I'm in the high-speed class. You kind of come out of West Point, bingo, bango, bongo, you're right there. So you kind of do what everybody does. You go to infantry school, airborne school, ranger school, come out. That's where I got the watch. That was my graduation gift from Ranger School.
They give you a Rolex? Oh, your dad got you a Rolex.
No, bullshit. I bought it at the exchange. It was $300 in 1985.
So good for you, man. Good
tax
for
free.
you.
So that's kind of my wedding ring to the Army, my wedding ring to my wife. And so
I love it, man.
And so I go in and always had kind of like the Special Forces mission. They don't take. SF is, it's different in the teams. In the Navy, you can kind of branch select and go in there offhand. And in the Army, it's a little different for both the Tier 1 units then. And the perspective is the Tier 1 units weren't quite around as they were in the middle 80s when I graduated from college, started going through SF school. And so you kind of spend a couple of years in and you apply to go in. Sometimes you're recruited. Sometimes people come up and tap you on the shoulder.
Into SF? Like
into SF.
Okay, so but by then, can you even apply until you got out of Ranger School? Or
No, you do that up front, but you need a couple of years. Typically they only take captains, and so that's a 3-year stick. Now, I was a bit of a controversial candidate because in the reserves, the promotions are half the speed of the active Army. So I'm still a second lieutenant. I get boarded in, and you boarding in, you got to get interviewed by the receiving unit. You got to get boarded in by you. And that was right when the USOCOM was coming around a couple years later. But you got kind of boarded. You got interviewed by the school. You go through the psych batteries, everything else, and then which is kind of how they handle the Tier 1 guys now. But I was influenced because one of my good friends from that time is Greg Kane. So Kaner's down in Orlando now. And so he was at Fort Bragg working in SOCOM, or the version of it then, and got to know a guy named Dick Potter. Now, Dick was the original deputy commander in Delta. And so Dick was, kind of I call him the ghost, because he was the guy that was the advanced AFO guy, basically the advanced force guy in Tehran for a month before.
And it's all in Fort Benning still?
Yeah. So, no, they're at Fort Bragg. So,
Okay.
But kind of got to know guys. And it's like, okay, well, it's sounds like pretty cool shit. And so what happens, your friends keep going. So I get to SF school the first phase. And the reservists come in that case in 4 phases. You go in phase 1, which is kind of basic skills. Every material SAR can do it. Phase 2 was skill generation phase. Phase 3 was SEER. And phase 4 is Robin Sage, which is the validation exercise. And they mix it up as they do now. They move SEER around. They put the defense, they put the D-Lab and the language training in there.
Where do you go to SEER school at?
In Fort Bragg. At Fort Bragg. And so it's funny because I went through the second class and Nick Rowe was still running it then. And so there's times in your career you kind of sit down and go, you're just lucky to be in the right place, the right time, and talk to kind of a luminary. Got to talk to Nick Rowe for an hour. And what was about that was be very thankful for what you've got, because it could be a lot worse. And that was kind of the punchline after an hour. But Nick was just actually a really good guy. Of course, got killed a few years later in the Philippines. He was assassinated, was sitting in a car in the Philippines. But anyway, so go through SF school, come out, and I get my heart broken. And so in the old days,
like literally from a woman, or was
from
it?
a woman.
Okay.
So I get my heart broken. I'm dating somebody who I thought was the one, and clearly after meeting my wife, she pales in comparison. But the long story short was that and a bunch of guys that have been in either in the teams or in the special operations community. We're all a little damaged. Okay, we're all a little kind of angry at the world. We're all a little broken, and in some way, shape, or form.
The most interesting people.
Exactly. So in the old days, though, before they had Tier 1, it was all special mission branch. So if you're a SEAL or in the Navy, they'd have that group that would handle the boat guys and the SEALs, and on our side, it'd be the Rangers. We only had 2 Ranger battalions back then. It wasn't the full regiment. They had 8 SF groups, and it was like the British. They had an active and a reserve group that were aligned, like the SAS. They had and the other smaller units, and there were other smaller units that weren't like the unit that were special missions units. So you just call the desk. It's like, and literally guys would lose a job, or literally teachers want to take a year off, go, hey, they call the desk, go, hey, I need a deployment. For
a year, yeah.
Yeah. What do you want? I need 6 months, and they go, okay, we'll call you back in a couple of days and we'll give you some options. It's like,
shut up. I would have, if I was given that option, I would have taken that option. That seems like a pretty nice option.
It was. It's a little more. I would say.
Oh, it's not like that anymore. Yeah, for sure.
Not. But it was funny because they called back and says, "Hey, listen, you got I was in 12th group aligned to 1st group, APAC, and so they go, well, you speak Italian, so how does Spanish sound? We'll send you to 7th group in Central America. Great."
That actually sounds cool.
It was cool. And so you're like 26 on the plane, you get down to Gujagapa, you transship out to Rio Hato, and you basically do. So what I really spent over the next 24 months is doing drug interdiction. That was the war on drugs, which is fundamentally a mission to boil.
Now, what year is this? Is this 85, 86?
Oh, no, it's later than that. So I go through the queue in 87, early 88.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's kind of 88.
Yeah.
So 88, 89. And so it's, you get on the wheel. So it's like you got to do missions, you get good at it.
But listen, what were you doing as a civilian at that time? Because you were a reservist.
So I worked.
Were you working for your old man's shop?
Not yet. So most people don't know, you can't get qualifying experience. So being a professional engineer is like being a CPA or a lawyer or something like that. You got to get, so a lawyer, you kind of test and then you bar in. Well, most other, I think for the CPAs and certainly for the engineers, you need 3 years of qualifying experience. You need kind of apprenticeship work, basically. Yeah. And you get recommendations and you get boarded in, and then you take the exam, and then you get tabbed out, you get sealed out. So what happens at that point, I'm working for Dad, and then I was working for Charlie Krieger, and then I ended up working for a company called Keller and Gannon, which is now owned by Xander, which was owned by Knight at the time, now owned by NW Xander. And so they did a lot of DoD work, just who I had happened to fall in with. And so it'd be like you kind of talk about funny. I'm working for them, and, I'm sent to Germany for 4 months to work. And so where do I do weekend drill as a reservist?
With some SF unit in Germany?
I call the 1st of the 10th in Bad Tolz and go, I literally catch the duty officer. Okay, dude, this is like, Lieutenant Mazzetti here. I'm in Frankfurt working. I gotta do weekend work. I go, you gotta IGX. I mean, I'll do anything. I'll come down and, clean the coffee pots. He goes, no problem. Just, hey, we got stuff. We got a little bit of work to do. So come on down. We can do target work, or you can do paperwork. Fine. Jump on the train, come down for a week and come back and do my thing. So it was kind of in the old days. It was, I would say, feels much more informal than it did today.
But you were being able to play both sides. You were being able to get that EIT
I would go in and out.
experience.
I go out for 6 months. I come back for 3 months, go out for 6, then I came back for a month and went out for another 6. And that's kind of the end of it. And so if you remember the movie American Sniper, where it's like, he's on the roof and it's like, I want to come home now. Yeah, that's how it is. It's like, there's a point, I have friends that have gone all the way to the 4-star rank. I've had friends that have gone, who've commanded significant tier 1 units. And it's like, they're good with it. They keep going. And there's a real happy ending in one of those stories, which, but it's, and a lot of happy endings to those stories, by the way. But it's just like, I want to go home now. I'm kind of done.
Yeah, you kind of, I've not been in that same situation from the movie, but I'll tell you this. I've seen it. I've been like, when the box is full.
So that's it. And it's like, it's time. And it's really, that was about 31 and 2 things. One, I was just about to get, I just got married. And I told Mare I said, listen, she says, I want to get married. You can't keep doing this. You can't keep vanishing for 6 months and going into the hinterland and being a gunslinger.
You were just straight up South America, right?
And Southeast Asia. Oh, okay. The ultimate mission was Southeast Asia, and that was, and what we do back then, it kind of looked like Mac v. SOG. It didn't look like War and Terror. It didn't look on the Balkans. It's just different. I mean, you're over the wire for multiple days. You go over the wire and you're in great shape. You come back like 16 pounds lighter in 10 days. I mean, it's really hard on the body. I mean, you come in, your uniform just dissolves off you. It's just, it's tough push. And so, but you get through all that stuff, you do what you got to do, come home, and it's like, okay, I know you got to stay in the reserves, but you got to get out of this. No problem. But what's interesting about it is that so the instant part, I was driving over and I says, what kind of my closest friends, what is the one thing we have in common? Shared suffering.
Yes. Stress inoculation is what Rob calls it, but shared suffering is what I call it. And it's something that's crazy about how going through something that pressure tests you together collectively brings you, it really does bring you closer together. Don't you agree?
I agree. And I think the challenge to that so I don't know how, I think in SEAL school they have it, but they certainly have in Ranger school, certainly have in SF school, they have peer evaluations. So you can have somebody who's a really great student, really great when the spotlight's on them, or we call them spotlights, is that when the spotlight's off you,
I know where you're going.
You're not a good person. And you're about yourself. And it's really, again, it's not about yourself. It's about, do you make the team, the group, the mission better? Because, in the military, it's like, do I live or die as a result of that?
Exactly.
Or do we succeed on that? And do I keep thousands of the people from dying?
Success is based on mortality, though. It's not based on revenue.
Exactly. And so, but in the other case, though, is you will deal with people in business, and you've seen that they keep score with money. Okay. And we've seen folks like that, and that's not bad. It's not, I don't think it's particularly an evolved sense of value systems. But on the other side, though, is that it's that shared suffering, that pressure testing. The other part, too, is that usually in those environments, especially in a team environment, everybody kind of goes, okay, you've been through, and you also see how people are. And those are folks that you can kind of go, those are folks I can count on when the chips are down. Not because I have a need and I'm always going to go back to it, but there's a time you need to absolutely must have it, must succeed, or I need to get out of a jam, or I need this kind of help, or someone has a specific skill set or perspective that you need, and they're there for you. The only thing I tell that to people when they've approached me for help, I says, listen, it's like literally the Corleones. It's like someday I may ask for a service that day may never come. But there's times it will, and it does 100%.
Happen. And it's like professional equity that you trade on. It's just it seems dodgy, but it is absolutely the right way to approach it. I know that you're Italian, and I know that you're, but
by the way, let me finish the thought. So the interesting part was I saw Joe Cava, as you did in PTC. Joe's been a longtime friend. We've known Joe forever. Joe joined, which I give him a hard time. He joined the private club just down the road from us, Cow Club, where myself, Vanderzin, and Chaputis, and Balajadia are at Lake Merced. And so the funny part was, but Joe was looking for that experience. His joke now is, I need a couple guys to die to get off, the old guys to get off the list so I can get in the club. And he makes a good point, is that he goes, for as big as the data center business is, and I'm talking from a construction, management, ownership, finance, manufacturing standpoint, when you pull all that back, and you're talking tens of billions of dollars of capital work annually on a global basis. There's probably less than 200 people that run that business in the world and have influence in it. Or as I use the term, make your own weather. And it's not because you want to force yourself or force majeure yourself into it, but you're a player. And I think you're one of those guys. I think certainly Joe's one of those guys. I think Matt and Justin are one of those guys. Our job, by the way, is to take the young guys in our organization at Rosendin and around us, and I consider you part of that ecosystem, and I bring you along.
Oh, yeah, you've mentioned me a lot.
My job is to build that.
Let me tell you a funny story, Maz.
Yeah.
I've known who you were long before I met you. And I remember when I went to, I had it was like a 5-month stint where I was in MPS, trying with, awesome story. I'm not ashamed of that story at all. In fact, I did not leave because I don't like Matt and JT. Obviously, they're my, I love those guys. Friends. I left because there's, when you go through something that I've went through a point in time in your life, you will promise yourself something and you'll maintain that. You'll hold yourself to those things. And for me, I was like, I have to do these. And those guys were awesome. That's why we're still friends. They're like, Kirk, I totally get it. Like we're not. And I remember sitting back in that 5 months where I was there, and I was like, hey guys, who's this fucking powerhouse that I keep reading about? His name's Bill Mazzetti. And I said, is he a good dude? And those guys had nothing but reverence, right? Like. Those dudes don't give out their respect to people without earning it. Do you understand? Like, that's why I like them.
But we don't do this. So the guys, so you kind of talk about paying it forward or paying it back.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit like, you don't pick a mentor, you don't pick a friend. Sometimes the friends pick you. And it's a little bit like, okay, these guys have the emotional, physical, professional capability to do this. And so getting back to Joe's comment was, those 200 people, it's not like, oh yeah, I kind of married into money or something like that. That is shared. That is absolutely shared suffering. And we're talking about going through businesses now. So go back to my data center history in the 80s when it was bus and tag mainframe, 415 hertz motor generators, chill water. And what I hear in the 90s, we'll never see water in the data center again.
Oh, for sure.
Really?
We'll see. I mean, obviously we're seeing it now. But
immersed service. By the way, kind of water, kind of not. But by the way, but my point is,
there's water jackets. I mean, you're talking about
the
liquid,
heat exchangers back.
You're talking about oil-based,
exactly,
mineral oil-based
or you're even talking about stuff that's the non-dielectric cooling mediums. But my point being is that these are people that have evolved, have stayed in the craft, and evolved along the time with it. They're not journeymen. They are. I gotta get
Joe on here. I want to understand how he went from zero. We all started at somewhere. We all started at zero to, Joe Cava of Google, right? And I bet you he's got a lot of scars too to get to where he's at. People
Everybody
just don't see that.
So you look at folks. Look at Cross. Cross is a great example. I mean, at Digital really was the engine of that. Cross was, for most people don't know, Cross was the one that made the suggestion that we should start MPS in the skid business and do that offsite. Okay,
doesn't even surprise me.
Everybody knows. By the way, more than a few people know that. And so, but Chris is at Digital, and then you find out you don't get the top job. By the way, that happens, right? But unlike like at the unit where 3 guys are going for the commander spot, well, one guy's going to get it, and the other 2 guys are going to get really, really great jobs somewhere else, but it's not going to be that one. Well, in corporate life, it's like, well, you don't get the top job, or you don't get the job you want, and go pound sand. Well, if you don't like it,
well, listen, I think though. You're at that stage where all of them are qualified to be CEOs of whatever, and he's proven that, right? Yeah. So he went out and he recreated this whole new product in the industry that helps streamline stuff. And in the creation of his product, it created MPS.
Which, by the way, the whole theory of MPS and that modularity, and it's kind of basically we're going to adapt it. By the way, you know what that's a complete analogy for is the cloud. So if you look at data centers, so I go back to the point where before the uptime issue, so Charlie Krieger ran the Computer Users Roundtable, which was the precursor.
Was that like the genesis of uptime?
It was the genesis of uptime, but they basically copied the idea. Basically put a bunch of computer users together. Now, Charlie didn't charge for it. They just go have lunch. They have a meeting like at Chevron or, at...
Collect intel. Yeah, try to understand what's going on.
Just help each other out.
Yeah.
And so didn't monetize it. He just wanted to have everybody be better at
How do you understand the trends unless you're aggregating?
Exactly. But you take Cross, who's like, okay, so if you look at cloud, we went from a bus and tag, DASD, kind of specific compute environment. Hardware's married to application. I mean, literally, physically married to application. It's not distributed. And all of a sudden, you take Cross's piece, which is, okay, I'm going to do a lot of the same thing. And what's that sound like? Sounds
the
like
automotive industry. He recreated the way that we produce data
and
centers.
servers.
Yes.
And in many cases now basically if you can extrapolate that to software-defined network, software-defined storage, software-defined processing, so Chris was kind of taking, because he came from the services side of the business, not the facility side of the business, when he came out of Nortel, and you turn around and go, he kind of took that, and by the way, before they realized, and before the cloud was around, we were real fortunate to build some of the earliest stuff, both in the Azure side of the house and the AWS side of the house. And
we being
Rosendin.
Okay.
Because this is like 06,
early
07.
days. When you got the Rosendin, how big were they then?
147 million bucks. Yeah.
And now they're top line 3 billion?
Three and change, 3.5, 3.2.
It's a lot of change, man.
It is. A lot of folks. And I think that's the challenge with the executive committee. It grows and it just kind of, it's not growing. I think it's kind of morphing. And the guys have done a great job.
Is there a bigger electrical contractor in North America than Rosendin?
I think so it's different. So I think when you look at somebody like Quanta, you look at somebody like MCore, it's different in the fact is that they're just organized differently. We're more monolithic. We're more kind of everything collaborates. The other ones might be a little bit more
like their holding company maybe bigger, but not their
kind
opcos.
of, we're a holding company in and of itself. But the fact is that I think we're more cooperating. We do, for example, safety is a corporate wide thing. Purchasing is a corporate wide thing. I can't speak to the other ones. I mean, you can read the 10Ks and 10Qs, but we're certainly on a private basis the largest specialty sub. And so
damn. 147 to 3. Go.
It's crazy. And, it's been a great ride. But I think the greatest thing that comes from, so you go back to Cross a little bit. So he saw that and it's like, listen, okay, I'm not going to do these bespoke facilities that are built, which were still done that way. And by the way, he came out of GI Partners and the wreckage of the .com where data center real estate turned from a strategic investment like a factory. I make this and I make information. Well, now I make information more generically. It turned into a real estate solution, turned from a real estate investment solution, and that broke the whole model. Now, Chris was at the very beginning of that.
I agree.
So was Jimmy. So was Joe. Joe was at Raging Wire. A lot of the guys that are like the players now were way back. You kind of follow them all the way back. They're hiding in the weeds, and we're down in our mid-level VP jobs or director jobs, and we stuck around. And so, but Chris was the first one to kind of get it. And then he kind of, to put it bluntly, I mean, listen, we have a lot of friends in this business, right? A lot of friends private equity backed. Like, I come in, I get the CEO job, and nothing against them. Chris fucking bootstrapped that job. Friends and family calling me up. So the joke was, Chris calls me and goes, listen, I want you to invest in Compass when it comes public. It's about the first time that Facebook was going public. Now, people don't know this, but Tom Furlong and I went to high school together. Tom was
Shut up.
SI class of 86. So
Navy
I knew Tom in high
Navy
school.
Academy grad.
Yeah. So 86, he's a boat driver. But Tom and so I knew Tom in high school. A senior knowing a sophomore is kind of an odd piece, but I just got to know Tom. Good guy.
Which one of you guys were older?
I am.
Okay.
So I'm 60, he's 50, 59 now. So, but the long story short is I knew Tom in high school. So we go way back. So he grew up in Tiburon, Sailor. I grew up in the city, played lacrosse. But, went to the same high school. It's an all-boys high school. Great. I mean, just it's like a frat house for 1,200 kids. And it was just great. We had a great time. But I go all the way back with Tom, and it's like, Chris, I got so much money I want to deploy. I go, literally, yes, I believe in the mission. But I'm going with Tom because, so what's funny is I was Tom's reference to go from when he went from Yahoo to Facebook.
Was he like Exodus or Equinix or
Equinix in the old days? Exodus in the old days. So way back. Started at Bechtel, went to Exodus, and then went to Yahoo, and then from Yahoo to Facebook.
One of the things I'll tell you, my furlong story, my first furlong story is I worked for Mark DiStefano. DiStefano sends this guy named Mark a note and says, "Hey, Mark, if you have a few minutes, I'd love to introduce you to Kirk. He's going to be out there, next week. Yeah. Do you have a few minutes for him?" Guy responds immediately. He's like, "Yeah, I'd love to. Hey, Kirk, swing by the office. Love to meet with you." Yeah. No idea who he is. That is how unassuming he is. Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
He's that guy. And and I think what Tom's going through right now, you look at, so what's funny in the old days, when I started in the data center business, every week I got on a plane. Data center business was New York, a little bit of Chicago, maybe a little bit of insurance work when you're building the sites that are outside the city after a while. Now, my clients are off the 101, or depending on one client, I got to drive down 280. Okay, so I can. It's I jump on the big hoopty and down the freeway I go in the Lexus lane, and I pull off and see whoever I need to see. And so it's a little easier. It's a little more civilized now versus grinding it out to JFK every week or Newark. And so, but Tom's been Tom got into Facebook. I remember going into there, and it's kind of funny. I kind of feels like I'm almost the Forrest Gump of data centers because Tom got hired. He was like number 120. I mean, they were all in one big office bullpen on University Avenue in Palo Alto in downtown. And it's like, here's the office door. Stand up, turn around, wave at Mark. He waves back. You sit down. I mean, it's just crazy how that stuff's around for GI Partners. And by the way, Matt and JT were around for that ride in the beginning. And when we started the business together, and I brought the business into Rosendin because I was known in the business, worked in it my whole career. And then,
How did you go? You went from Mazzetti. I know we're all over the place, but I love this about us. No. We have all the time in the world, so take your time. So when you were, take a number, right? So Dean Nelson and I did a podcast once, and like we were off camera once, and he's like, this will be a competition to see whose ADHD is worse. So you went Santa Clara, you went reserves, we unpackaged your military stuff, but then you went
to work for Charlie.
How did you go to Mazzetti? Because you were at your dad's shop for a while.
I worked for Charlie, then I went to Keller and Gannon for about 3 years, and I worked DoD work all over the
Keller who?
Keller and Gannon, owned by Knight, which was bought by Xander. They did DoD work. So when I was a kid, I did a nuke lab at Berkeley. I did Voice of America radio station in Central South America. I designed 4 of the GPS stations, including the one on Diego Garcia. I did work in Subic Bay, did work in Guam. I mean, when you're young, it's like, hell yeah.
Get on a plane, go anywhere.
TDY, yeah. I mean, I made a ton of money. That's how you save money. So you talk about life goals. I need to get money to buy a house. I just plow my TDY money into the markets and make some dough. So the funny part is that the funniest story to that, it's like, okay, we're going to send you to Hawaii for a month. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, except you're going to go work at Kinea Station, which if you know anything about Kinea Station.
Off like somewhere remote.
Dude, it's buried in the mountain. You don't, you go in at 7:30, you come out at 5, and you don't see the light. You don't see natural light all day. Now, you come out at 5:30, you go to the beach, you can hang out. But it's like I go underground like a gopher. And so a great deal. I mean, and that's great when you're that old. And what's interesting, because what was fun about SF is that, you know how the military is. You put very young people into a lot of responsibility, and you got to just sack up and get on with it. So it's the same thing. Do I mind going to a country where I don't speak the language? Fine. I'll go native. You find going to 13 different countries in 3 years? Sure. Don't have, ties at home with family and friends.
Life is short. Let's roll.
Exactly.
Were you married then?
No. Got married in 1990. So did that for a while, and then left K&G, went to work for Dad. And I was working for Dad. Dad, like I said, did the grocery food business, did healthcare, not a lot of data centers. Charlie did that in town, and Charlie and Dad were such good friends that was kind of like, okay. There was Camisa and Daryl Whiff and Mel Camisa, and Charlie and my dad were kind of the 3 main electrical consultants in San Francisco. And they kind of carved up the town. So Mel owned UCSF and a lot of medical work. Mel had that. Charlie had the data centers and a lot of the corporate commercial work. Dad did kind of the industrial food processing. They kind of just didn't cross over. And by the way, it was the gentleman's agreement. If somebody would call you and use their customer, you would call them and go, hey, listen, I'm getting a call. I don't want to do this. I'm uncomfortable.
Yeah, real relationships, real respect.
It was just the 70s and 80s. And so you kind of learned the gentleman's game from there. So, but I end up going to the family business in, '89. So I'm just out of SF school and start getting through it. And so so Charlie's retiring. Some of that business comes over. I'm doing it. And it's the same thing. It's kind of, and so how I got in the business, and at this point I'm competing against Mike Mossman and Peter Gross. And they're doing all the big data center work. Mike owns all this stuff. And so
Mossman, yeah.
And so here's the deal, though. The stuff they wouldn't touch is live retrofit. And I'm talking live, like the facility doesn't shut down. You're putting a couple taps on feeders. I mean, you're doing really dangerous shit.
Dangerous stuff.
And so that was my specialty. I got to do
open heart surgery,
neurosurgery, and I got good at it. My break job, of which, in fact, it was Donnelly, who used to be the SVP.
Of course, I know who he is.
So Don was a friend and mentor of mine for years. And
Bank of America?
Yeah. SVP at Bank of America, has 2 PhDs in nuclear physics.
Yeah, he's one of the smartest people I've met.
And it's funny because Don's, Don and I go to lunch after I say I'm leaving Mazzetti, and it's like, Don would call me, and even though he'd have HOK or Cisco working on his stuff, I get called in for the specialty work, the stuff that's like, I need to...
Complicated, messy.
Yeah, and I'll tell you how I got, and it kind of leads to the, how all of our careers in life work. You meet the right girl, you live in the right spot, you've got, you've worked hard in your business and your career. So I think you make your own luck, but there is a point in time that luck is just luck. You're in the right place at the right time.
100%.
So Don's there, and he goes, why are you going from, Mazzetti to Rosendin? I go, well, Don, here's how it works. I go to Rosendin, I design it, we put the script together, how to put it together, we see what the hell out of it in his vernacular, which is change management and research. I go, and then they go build the goddamn thing. I don't have to fight him about it. And Don sat there for a minute, and Don always had on-site consultants and on-site contractors. And he goes, Jesus, that makes a lot of sense.
Marrying the two.
Exactly. So get to Rosendin. We're doing $12 million a year of mission critical work back then. First job was an interview for the Progressive Data Center. It was a holder job in Denver. Don't get it. We finished second. It was funny. I come out and it's like, oh, we're only allowing 4 people in the room. You're kidding me, right? It's like, we brought 5. Well, you can't come in, Mazzetti. You got to sit in the lobby. So I'm just sitting there like a father waiting for the child to arrive. And we come out and they did a good interview by all measure. And didn't get the job. And so, it started kind of chipping away. So this is 04. This is kind of so,
You have your PE by then?
Oh, yeah, I had the PE. I got my PE at 24. Mm-hmm. I mean, the number's ancient. And so in the 13,000s in the state in California. Anyway, long story short, so you just kind of, earnestly flogging your wares. And so old clients, what happens? Old clients follow you in, and that's what happened. A couple of clients did that. And, to be honest with you, I have no idea how I know how we got together with Crosby. So Cross is the sales guy working for GI Partners, standing up this real estate fund. It wasn't called Digital Real Trust. The point, it was just part of one of the funds that Magnuson had raised. And so I meet Chris. So we are at, of all things, an AFCOM meeting, national conference in Chicago. So Crosby is all of maybe 24, 25, scrubbed, got his pitch done, and he's just kind of standing there by himself. Now, Chris is not a wallflower by any measure, but, he's like kind of standing there. I go over and it's like, okay, tell me about, but a lot of my friends in San Francisco are private equity guys, investment bankers, so just kind of my friends. And so you kind of, you're from an investment fund. Tell me why are you here? Because this is not a spot. Well, we're buying up all these distressed assets and we're doing this. And then I go, so you're telling me that you're going to turn the data center business into a real estate investment business? He goes, yeah. I am standing 10 feet from Mark Bittinger at that time. And I go, Biddy, get over here. I go, you need to listen to this because this is the smartest goddamn idea I've heard in 15 years. And Chris lays it out, and Biddy's like trying to process because this is like, you're talking about people that would spend, $3 million, $30 million a megawatt to build a data center. Yeah.
That's unbelievable.
So we're talking about, there's 4 tier 4 facilities in the world. They're built on average. In fact, that was a trivia contest between Misha Putis, Vanderzen, and Balajati over the weekend. There's only 4. The average cost is $50 million a megawatt. B of A, it's the peak of its powers. With all the CWIP process, everything else they did, they would build at $37 million a megawatt. And I think arguably, with all due respect to my friends at JP Morgan Chase and a lot of other places, probably had the best critical facility portfolio in the world. Not that those guys aren't as good, but from a consistency basis, I think B of A was kind of the platinum standard. So it's like, holy cow. So you talk about like, I'm going to go talk to that guy because he just looks lonely. Okay, it's my mother's gift. It's like, okay, you never know. How do you meet the queen or the princess? Kiss a lot of frogs. Yeah. So do that, and then it's like, but it goes back to like 94 when I was working in Mazzetti, and I go to the first. It was not 7x24, but it was the Uninterruptible Uptime User Group. That portfolio is in my bag. It is considered to be my most valued business possession. It's a black Bosca portfolio, black leather. I still have it. It's literally like a sidearm. It's never off my body when I'm deployed. And it was funny because I go to this conference in 94, like right when they first did like a national conference in Dallas. I come back and partners me, he goes, what's this all about? I go, this internet? I think it's going to be a big thing. So it kind of starts, you just kind of, maybe you just get a sense of it, but you have to tug on the string a little bit.
This is late 80s.
Yeah, so it starts with digital, it kind of keeps going, and then, at that time, Rosendin wasn't really a kind of the dominant provider. It was really Coop. Did a good job to a certain extent, and then we just kept chipping away at it. You just they say, well, how do you be successful? You go till someone tells you to stop. You put the rucksack on and you keep walking.
That's
and
it.
You go till somebody tells you to stop.
Exactly.
It's not about you determining that. It's the market and your peers or your customer at that point.
I agree.
So we just we hit that. We worked. We did work for Apple. Did work for the tech companies. Did work for Microsoft when they were early in the cycle. Certainly with Facebook, we were lucky at Facebook. We did all their work exclusively for a few years. That built a larger portfolio, so it just starts to kind of gain steam. That allows us to bring the young executives like the Ken and McAdoo's, like certainly JT and Matt to start with. It was Matt first, and then JT came in, and then Matt kind of took a little more superior position. But that, I told them when they're like, in their late 20s, early 30s, I go, dude, you're getting groomed for corner offices. Get used to playing on this field size. And that served them well. Both those guys are early mid 40s right now, and they are luminaries in the business by great men, great family people. I mean, on
Just
top
great
of all, they're great people.
Yeah.
So I mean, I think we've been lucky to be in the right place at the right time for a lot of that stuff. Does that mean you get every job? Heck no. But what you should do, and this is like in the military, where you come off an athletic field, you go, okay, that didn't work. Don't piss and moan like a little bitch. Sit down and take a hard look at why you failed, and fix it. And then, by the way, anticipate what the next 3 moves are and get ahead of that. There are days it's not you. I don't care. I've walked into that room with not as good a team, not the best number, not the best schedule, not the best plan, and we win the day. For whatever reason. Most times that doesn't happen. But there's times you've also walked in, and you've crushed it, you've done the best number, you've got the best thing, you don't win today. Guess what? But go back, but don't be emotional about it. It's not about you. I've got 1,000 people, and now in this case at Rosendin, I mean, if you look at the people attached to the data center business in Rosendin, that's about 3,000 people every day. I have 3,000 people I feel directly responsible for, as do my peers inside the outfit. And so it's like, okay, you know what? You want to go home and tell them they lost the job because you're a leader and you've got to keep the business going because you can rainmake?
It does do something to you when you're responsible for other souls.
Yes, you do.
When you are responsible for the souls, you do work more selflessly and you suffer more of an inconvenience without complaining. I had a chief that introduced me in an early age to what's called the rule of threes. Are you familiar with this? Mm-hmm. So 1/3 of your time is going to be great, 1/3 will be okay, and 1/3 will suck. And I looked at that where whenever I had a great one, I was like, oh, I'm going to have an okay one and a shitty one still to follow, right? But if you have your shitty one, you're like, cool, it's going to be good or great next, right? So you learn to develop emotional range by understanding, like, that's just inevitable. It's part of it.
And I also think there's kind of an emotional callous. So the joke is about the rule of 3, as I always think this is an SF thing. It's like, bad shit comes in 3s. Yeah. So if it's the first one, okay, you got to do the next couple. And by the way, the sad
I've heard that too. Deaths come in 3. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the other side of it too is sometimes bad stuff just keeps happening. That goes back to the point was you need to stop and reset and realize, can you fix it? And there's times, Kirk, and you know this, you can't fix it.
Yeah.
This is going to be a fatal mistake for you, your company, your team, and sometimes you got to step off the field. Today, you just got your ass handed to you.
Yeah, okay? It's going to happen.
And by the way, and so if you're committed to a business, you guys are certainly a mission critical business. What's funny is I started in life science. One of my great joys in life is really bioscience, research facilities, biotech. Was good at it. It's just a.
You're a nerd. You love that stuff. You love advanced science.
Exactly. But what's funny is that when you live in an ecosystem long enough, certain species rise and fall. It happens. It's just that's the nature when you're in the data center business for a couple of decades. By the way, not only do you rise and fall based on, we don't like you, Mazzetti, because you're Italian or you're fat or you got blue eyes today. Hey, it's not your day to day, okay? Or those guys are making a more compelling pitch or commercial argument. Guess what?
I'm going to win them all. Yeah.
Go home and work harder.
Yep.
It says, but the fact is, when you're around long enough, you realize, and I believe in the rule of 7. The rule of 7 is that the data center industry recasts itself every 7 years. Okay, so let me back up by saying that. So right now, everybody's talking about a chat GPT.
Yeah.
So the fact is, it's AI, and it's AI that's, I wouldn't say weaponized, but now you're dealing with data foundries that are at scale. And the thing with AI requires an immense amount of processing. And so now you actually have compute facilities that can do that and can do it on demand, whether it's in Azure, it's in AWS, it's in Google Cloud. You can do that stuff. I mean, I actually tried the new Bing this morning, because they've turned, it's like, holy cow. I mean, it's like, I'm sending my money guys going, okay, thank God we've got a lot of money parked in Microsoft because it's going to turn to a lot more money real quickly. But there's certainly a fad to it. But there's also a point where there's a confluence of network, application, hardware, and market. And it's there. And so is this going to turn to HAL and Skynet or something like that?
Oh, yeah, for sure. That's the fear.
Maybe. There is. But you go back. So this is 2023. You back up to 2014. And that's really kind of the height of, I think, where commercialized real estate, the colo business was. And that's a mature business. It's not like it's going away, but it's really, that's kind of evolved to that point. You back up to 2007. And what do you have? AWS, the birth of the cloud. You know what that was? My dog's eating that dog food. Your dog's going to look great eating that too. And by the way, AWS built, same thing like Azure, was built out of a repurposed internal product. AWS was the Amazon backplane running the business. Azure was built from the gaming platform. Okay, so a bunch of smart people. It's like, so you're kind of aware of your surroundings as we do in our environment. You go, or cross, or you just go, wait a second. If I put some time and cows into this thing, maybe I can use that thing for something different. I can really multiply the efficacy of that investment or what we're doing here. Those companies did that. A lot of smart people working there. You go back another 10 years, or 7 years, 2000, Y2K, okay? So people talk about Y2K as such a failure. But think about it for a minute. We're still running a network over fiber that was laid back then. You talk about businesses that came out of this. So you kind of talk about the problem about being old. The fact is you're not omnipotent. You've just been around long enough to see stuff. SB Telecom. So that was the first long-haul fiber business, right? That was Southern Pacific Telecom. They ran that stuff down the railroad right away because I can run that thing for 400 frickin' miles and just have my shelters down there boosting the signal. Still a lot of dark fiber, okay. Well, a couple other things came out of the .com, okay. You've kind of got, people joke about, Chewy.com right now, right? We buy stuff for Murphy on that. And it's like, great. So, that's a great business. They sold that to what, $3.5 billion to Walmart? You remember the talking sock puppet? Petfood.com, pets.com. They had a little talking dog sock puppet. That thing went bankrupt. Guess what? 20 years later, it's a $3 billion business. Webvan, one of my dad's customers. We're gonna take, Webvan was really, okay, we're gonna take groceries and you're gonna order them by faxing in an order, and we're gonna put it together and send it to you. We're gonna deliver it to your house. God, blew up into .com. Guess what? Sure as hell sounds like Grubhub and Amazon and everything that's going on right now. For sure. So there's times where they're great ideas, and sometimes I think
just ahead of their time.
Exactly.
The market wasn't mature enough for it. Exactly. They adopted it at a rate
and
which
the funny thing about market is that you got ideas, but this is a commercial enterprise. You may have the best idea in the world, unless somebody buys it, you're not. Best friend growing up, Bill Bentley. His dad was a family attorney in town, but San Francisco Golf Club member, Cypress member, kind of plugged in the PU club, that part of town. And Mr. Bentley would always interview young attorneys coming out of school. And he goes, what's the most important thing for an attorney to have? And he goes like, knowledge of the law, passion for justice. And he goes, no, clients. Because if you don't have clients, you're selling flowers on the side of the road, which is nothing against that. Yeah. What it means is you can't do what you want to do or are trained to do.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to do something, or the structure of your company, or even the culture of your company is the backbone, but the lifeblood is the revenue that comes in. You have to have those clients.
It's funny because there are times where, I also use the Men in Black. You know me. I love telling anecdotes and stuff like that. So you remember in the first Men in Black movie, it's like, we got to get on this thing because there's always a Carillion death ray about virus to wipe on the planet, about to wipe out life on the planet. There's always a problem and challenge in business. Okay? Once you just emotionally agree that that's just in a leadership position, that's just how life is, there's opportunity and challenge. Once you just kind of emotionally buy into that poker game, you're fine.
Yeah, it's all emotion.
You stop getting to be, I'm a victim, or life hates me. Guess what? Life is fair. Mother Nature spins the wheel, and she doesn't care if it comes up 1 or 30. Whoever's on 1 or 30 gets 2 in the back of the head, like Luca Brasi. So once you kind of get past that, but there's times where you also can't get so married to ideas that's like, this is it, because you know what? There's so much ownership, especially in this business, and you've seen it both on technology and real estate. I mean, look at Savas back in the day. Nothing wrong with Savas as a company, but Pepe goes in and goes, hey, listen, I firmly believe that I should be putting density in these buildings that's 50% over what I can sell in the marketplace. Guess what? Today, looks like a visionary. Back then, damn near broke the business.
Yeah.
So it's not that it was wrong, it was untimely.
Yeah.
But if you look at guys that have really done well, like Cross, like Joe, like folks, so 2 things I think they do really well at. One is they adapt within their environment. In other words, they're sensitive enough to kind of tactically move around, to kind of step around the landmines, but are also smart enough to see far enough ahead to know what's going to work, but stay in the immediate to get it funded, get it pushed, get it built, and get it done.